This is going to be day 6. It's going by fast. Here we got Matthew 21 to 24 today. Try to keep up. I'm just kidding. It's a lot of information always. So Matthew 21, we have his triumphal entry, Jesus Christ, on a donkey, which fulfills a prophecy that was given that he'd come on a donkey and a colt. We also have him clearing the temple because it says that that they would have, it was supposed to be a house of prayer, but they had made it a den of robbers, and so the people were selling the sacrifices, or selling pigeons, and they were, it was just a marketplace instead of actually being used for, for temple purposes. He curses the fig tree, and it happens immediately. I think in another gospel, it happens like the next day or something, and people use that to say that the Bible contradicts itself. This is Jesus' question on his authority, and it also gives the parable of the 2 sons and of the tenants. And the 2 sons was an interesting one because it's about the response that they have. The first son is told to do something, and he's like, no, I'm not going to do it, but then he does end up doing it. The second son says, oh yeah, I will do it, but he doesn't end up doing it. And it was Jesus like, well, who was the one that did right? Who was the one that was righteous? And it was the one that, although he didn't initially take up the charge to do it, he eventually did. And because he actually did what the Father had asked him to do, he was the one that was justified. So it was just an interesting parable. We also have the tenants parable where they they're told to look over the land, and the master keeps sending servants, and they're beating the servants, and then they bring his son, and they were like, well, let me kill the son and we can have the property. And so then this is of course it's a picture of Jesus Christ, that the Father sent the Son, and so it's just the wickedness of the tenant, the people who like I said, and also it's also in reference to the scribes, and people who claim to be overlooking God's property, yet when the person who is in charge of it, they disdain. Matthew 22. This is the parable. This is the wedding parable. I like just refresh my mind to read it, and how there's people who are initially invited, and then the people who are initially invited to this wedding would of course be the house of Israel, and yet they invite all these people, yet all these people started making excuses. In the story, it was a king who was throwing a wedding, and people started making excuses. I got my business to run, I have to do this, I have to do that. They're making excuses, and so the king gets upset, he gets frustrated, he gets mad, and he's like, okay, well, tell these other people to invite them, get them off the streets, bring whoever can come, just bring them in. And so it's just it's an image of the gospel and how it was for initially first for the Jew, which is Romans 1:16 talks about, and then to the Gentile. And so it's just a beautiful story how we're as a Gentile are a part of this wedding feast that Jesus Christ portrays. We also have the do pay Caesar what is Caesar's and God is God. That's also in Matthew 22. The Sadducees ask about the resurrection because the Sadducees was the religious sect of Judaism, and they didn't believe in the resurrection, 1. And 2, they were trying to trap Jesus. Of course, they're always trying to trap Jesus. And they come up with this bogus story about so and so, this lady had all these husbands, and they were just who was pretty much, it came down to whose wife is she gonna be in the resurrection. And Jesus was like, you guys don't even get it. You don't know about these heavenly things, and in the resurrection there's no marriage. Everybody's like the angels. We are there just in complete adoration and being fulfilled by God, and not in this established the marriage that we have here on earth. And we also have the greatest commandment, to love God with all your heart, mind, and strength, and also the second like it, to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Interesting fact, if you don't know, that's actually, I think, a quote from Deuteronomy. It's interesting because he's not giving any of the 10 commandments, but he's giving something out of the other laws. And so it's just kind of, I don't know, I always thought it was kind of interesting that those were the ones that he picked, and these are by far more demanding than the 10 commandments that we're given. Another question about who's the son of, who is Christ, who is the, about the lineage of Christ, and how whose son is he? And they're like, he's the son of David. And he's like, well, David calls his Lord Lord, how can he be a son? And that's when actually it says that people stop asking Jesus about this thing. Jesus was just, he was just too smart. He had his stuff together. Matthew 23 is mainly about the 7 woes to the Pharisees, and I guess to summarize them up, it's just essentially the hypocrisy that they display on the, inwardly, they're dirty. So that's the hypocrisy. The hypocrisy is that outside they look righteous, but on the inside they're unclean. And he breaks down all these different scenarios and these different reasons as to why they are. And this is actually where you kind of get the practice what you preach. I think that's verse 3. He actually opens it up with, do as they tell you to do, and because they're instructing you in the ways of the law and the ways to live. So do those things, but don't do what they are actually doing. Like, for instance, they would this is an interesting thing. They would tithe. They were so strict on tithing. They would tithe like they said that they mentioned like cumin and mint and these spices. They were so religious that they would take a portion of spices and make sure they offered it. But then he's saying like that you guys are hypocritical because you would do that, but you wouldn't focus on what is important: justice, mercy, forgiveness. And Jesus actually, that's one of the charges. That's the hypocrisy. They're outwardly, he compares them to a whitewashed tomb that, it's like a brand new marble, brand spanking new marble or whitewashed stone tomb. It looks great, and on the inside it's just full of dead people. And so that's the kind of person that he's describing them, not to be. So that's essentially Matthew 23. Matthew 24 is probably one of the more popular end times chapters. He foretells the destruction of the temple, which was actually fulfilled in 70 A.D. under the Emperor Vespasian. And so it's interesting. Matthew was written before 70 A.D. Is actually accurately portrayed the destruction of the temple that was in Jerusalem, and so we see that fulfillment. He also gives the signs of the coming of the age and kind of breaks down different phases that happened, and each phase kind of just involves false prophets and false Christs. And if you look in the world today, it is very interesting that there are a lot of false Christs and false prophets. I don't remember the last big hype about like a false Buddha or a false Krishna or a false, any other type of deity, a false Muhammad. There is none of that. But but there is a lot of, false Christs. And so it's just, it's just interesting that this is the fulfillment. This is the fulfilling things that kind of exist in our world. So something to pay attention to. The other important thing in this chapter is the abomination that causes desolation, which is in reference to Daniel, and they pervert the sacrifices in the tomb. And if I remember correctly, that when they destroyed the temple in 70 A.D., I think that they were making like pig sacrifices or pagan sacrifices in the temple before they destroyed it, and so, or they covered the temple in pig's blood or something, some crazy things that they were doing in the temple. But this also, kind of, so some people would say that some of this stuff is already fulfilled. Excuse me. However, there is still this great apostasy that has to happen. That hasn't happened. I don't know really if it has happened. I know people fall away from the faith all the time, but it's a noticeable apostasy, and it comes out of the fact of a great tribulation. I believe it's verse 9, says that there's going to be a great tribulation, and out of this there'll be this huge falling away, and then there's I'm sorry, that was just you will face tribulation, and then there's this reference to a great tribulation and how that if the days weren't cut short, no human being would survive, but for the sake of the elect, they are. And so, again, more false prophets, more false Christ, performing miracles and signs and wonders and awing the people. And he's giving us the advice, when they say he's in the desert or he's in this inner room or he's, Jesus is there, Jesus is there, Jesus is there. When he comes, nobody's gonna have to tell you. That's what he's trying to tell you. When he comes, the whole heavenly bodies are shaken. He comes and it's really, there's no doubting that, okay, this is him who is the one that is the Son of Man. And so this is what, because the disciples had asked him, well, how do we know the end of the times are coming? And The biggest thing that I got out of this last one, and this is just, it just really, you know, got me. You know, I think I missed the point so much when I get caught up in, you know, all these little things about Christianity, you know, all the little specifics and the details, and you knowing so much about my faith and the faith of others. And this kind of chapter is very sobering because, you know, really, he's just saying we need to live in the light. You need to live like I am coming back, and that's up towards the end. Like, how shameful of a day would it be, is if you lived your Christian life and, you know, thinking that everything was peachy keen, but on this day that he came back, you were just caught up in the craziest situation, and you chose to do it, and it wasn't the right thing to do, and you were not in that, you should not be in that place. It was the opposite place you should be, and you're there, and now the Son of Man, the one who had believed it, is here. I mean, how shameful and embarrassing of a day that would be. And it just really, you know, hit home. And I just encourage, you know, we have to, you know, John 3:19, read that. But this is day 6, and so this is my insights to it, and you guys have a great day.